I'm Andrew Joseph Keith. I'm an artist and sculptor. In this video, we're going to be talking about my method for building this armature for portrait sculpting. Let's get into it. As far as materials, I'll be using a miter saw or a chop saw. You can use a skill saw or a jigsaw if you don't have a chop saw. I also have a hammer and some nails that I'll be using, some wood glue. And as far as the types of wood, for this one, I've been using a lot of scrap wood, but if you're only gonna get one type of wood for the whole thing, well, you'll need two. You'll need a 2x4, which is these thicker parts in the back, and those are usually relatively inexpensive, and you can do a lot with a single 2x4. You should be able to get quite a few of these heads out of that. But if you're gonna get one type of wood for the rest of the construction, then I might use something like this, a plywood. This one's about 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch thick plywood. So if you have to purchase wood and you're just gonna get one type of wood, then I recommend some of this. And if you don't have nails, you can use wood glue for quite a bit of it, but you'll need some sort of clamp or something to hold it in place. So once you have your materials, the most difficult part is gonna be doing a rough profile shaped board. That'll be the base for the entire armature. This is gonna be the profile of the sculpture. So let's go over how to make that. So these measurements are gonna be for a portrait that's about 3/4 life size, but you can shrink them down, and as long as you get the basic shape right, then you should be good regardless of what size you go with. So this is the basic shape that we're going for. And to do that, we're gonna start by measuring up 6 inches. There we go. 6 inches, and we'll connect these. Okay, and there we have a line at 6 inches. Now we're gonna measure over 6 inches again. 6 inches again. And this is gonna be where the start of this angle right here is going to be. Then to get the angle, we want this to be cut at 15 degrees. This right here. So this is going to be the profile of the face that's going to come forward a little bit. So this is the profile line of the face. This is the jaw right here. We want that to be at 15 degrees. What I do is just make this cut right here and then adjust the saw to 15 degrees and make this cut right here. So this right here is the chin. So here you can see there's one head that's upside down, one head that's right side up. This is the chin on this one, the chin on this one. So with these, just by cutting this way and then making one cut right here at 15 degrees, and then cutting this last one at 6 inches from the forehead over here, you'll basically be able to make 2 of these with 1 piece of wood. And to get these angles, I just took a skull and aligned it with a piece of wood and then tried to estimate about where those cuts should be so that we have the basic structure of the skull established inside of that block of wood. If you like this type of content, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell if you'd like to be notified when I release videos. Now, if you're gonna make several of these, I found that it was easier to stack the pieces of wood on top of each other and then make several cuts at once. That way you can make several that are identical very quickly. It also helps the cuts to be cleaner and to have less of the fraying that comes from cutting with the miter saw. So the only angles that we're going to be using for this entire project are 15 degrees and 45 degrees. And so this right here is going to be a 15-degree cut for the profile of the face. 15 degrees. 15 degrees for this angle right here on the profile of the face. And then inside here is just a 6x6 box with a 15-degree cut starting at that 6-inch mark and then coming a little bit in front of that box. And then to get the rest of the shape, you're gonna switch the miter saw to a 45-degree angle and make 45-degree angle cuts at the forehead, then at the chin. And at the chin, you can do it 45 degrees from the front plane of the face or from the bottom of the chin. It doesn't matter too much. It'll change this angle a little bit, but we just want to take off that sharp chin. Then you're also going to take off these corners at the back of the head, 45 degrees. So basically you're just rounding off all the corners, and then everything else we can cut using that 45-degree angle. And once you make all those cuts, this is what the profile of the face should look like. And if you could see the chin, it would be somewhere right here, and this would be negative space, but we don't need to cut this out because we'll be using this area to attach the neck. All right, the next part is cutting this 2x4 so that it can be this mass on either side of the widest point of the skull. So let's go over how to cut these. So you're gonna do a 45-degree cut, and then measure out 1 inch from that cut, and do another 45-degree cut by flipping the piece of wood around so that it tapers towards the outside. And then this will be the angle for the next piece. So then we'll measure out again 1 inch and then make another 45-degree cut over here, and we can zigzag our way depending on how many that we're going to build. So let's go ahead and cut a couple of those. Setting that at 45 degrees. And so we're cutting this long ways. You don't want to cut the 45 this way. You want to cut it long ways. And then we want, on the shorter part, we want 1 inch. If you want to make it a little bit easier to see where to cut, you can make a line. Just add a temporary line right there. And that way you know where to align it so that you can just quickly go through and make cuts. There we have 2. So that's going to be for 1 of these armatures. Let's cut a couple more. There we go for another one. Each armature will need 2 of these. Let's do 1 more set. You could just check to make sure that they're the right size. Now you could leave it at that and just place these right here onto the sculpture on either side like this, and that would be fine. But I like to just cut off this corner right here, right where this comes and touches right there. Just cut off that corner there and then cut off this corner right here, because I find that it just moves it out of the way. That way I can scoot it up here and it doesn't go off of this edge of the profile. And then it also gives me some room to attach the neck down here. So to do that, we need to cut a 45-degree angle again, but placing the block of wood this way this time. And be really careful with these cuts because the piece of wood is getting a little bit smaller. Make sure your fingers are out of the way. So I'm just going to move it right to that corner right there, and we're just cutting off this corner on this side. So there you can see, removing that corner on that side. Same thing on the other side. And then with this one, we need to do it so that these missing corners match. So we're not gonna be holding this flat part against the blade. This time we're going to be turning it, and this 45-degree angle is going to be pushed up against the blade, and we're going to be cutting off this one. And that way, when we line these up, these missing corners will align on the left and right side. So we're going to be removing that corner and removing this corner, because that way we have a right side and a left side that align and both tilt forward for where we need that tilt to be. Instead of cutting it this way, we turn it. We're going to be cutting it at the 45 degrees and just cutting off at that corner again. Same thing on this side. And then to check if you did it right, if those are aligned, you could just place those together. They should be pretty close to the same. And if you put them together like this, it should make like a heart shape, so that when we put it on here, we have space for the neck on both sides, and so it's about symmetrical from either side. So that's how we'll be attaching these. Because the thickest part of the skull is here towards the back of the head. Putting this piece of wood in will save us some clay and remind us that that's the thickest point. It's going to be back here. Oh, right now I'm finding out that you could take these and put some glue on it and then fan these out around the neck. If you wanted to not waste material, you could fan these out right there. Look at that. You could just glue these in place as some extra support. So yeah, maybe that's an option to make it look even just a little bit cooler. So now we're going to be cutting the sections for the neck. For this one, I'm using this piece of wood that's about 3/4 of an inch by 1 inch and 3/4. But like I was saying, if all you have is some plywood, or if all you have is the leftover scraps of the piece of wood that you already did. You can have a thinner neck. The neck doesn't have to be thick. This just happens to be some scrap wood. And I think after I finish with this, I'll have to grab some other type of wood because I don't have a lot of this one right here. So to cut these, the angles that we're going to be cutting these ones at is that 15 degrees again. So we're going to go switch it back to 15 degrees. 15 degrees, and then we're going to move it over. Let's move it over 7 inches about from that first cut. 7 inches around there. Could be a little bit more, a little bit less. If you want a longer neck, you can do more. Shorter neck, you can do less. And then we're going to be cutting it so that these two cuts are parallel. We're not going to flip it around like we did with the 2x4. We're going to have these two cuts be parallel, both of them at 15 degrees. Then we can just align this, move this over. There we have one neck for one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to one right there. So now we have the back of the head, the profile, and the neck. Now, one more thing that I like to do with these that you don't have to do, but I think it looks better, is to cut some 45-degree angle triangles for the trapezius muscles on either side. So these triangles are going to be right here. These ones are a little bit smaller triangles. I think I'll cut some that are just a little bit larger. Actually, I'll use these scrap pieces. So we're going to switch back to the 45 degrees. And then these triangles are a little bit large, so I'm going to cut these again, just right here down the middle. There you can see how the ones that were stacked right next to each other don't have that frayed edge, and then the ones at the bottom have the frayed edge. So that's why stacking them makes a little bit cleaner of a cut. Right now, these are about, I guess, 3 inches. So that's about the size of these triangles. So now we have these three, and now we can go ahead and put them on a baseboard. For these baseboards, these are scrap pieces. Let's see, this one's about 10 inches by 9.5 or somewhere in there. A lot of this wood was gotten from a cabinet shop, just the scrap pieces that they weren't able to use for their projects, they would get rid of. And so that's where I was able to get a lot of this wood for free. So I definitely recommend checking out if you have any cabinet shops or anything like that in your area. You might be able to save some money on wood. And I've got a hammer with some of these thinner nails and some wood glue. We'll actually need 3 triangles for each one, and one of the triangles needs to be the same thickness as the head. So you can use one of the triangles that we cut off during this part of the process, but I prefer to use these larger triangles that we already cut. Just gonna have to try to have this line parallel with the top. And then for this, I'm gonna put a scrap piece of wood underneath because sometimes the nails go through both and then into something, and I don't want it going into the base that we'll be using. So let's go ahead and glue this into place. Put some glue on here, put some on both surfaces. We're gonna put this on there like that and nail that into place. It's kind of tricky to get it not to slide because that glue makes it really slippery on the surface. Now hammering this is kind of tricky. If you can, I recommend getting one of those nail guns that has the thinner nails, the finishing nails that are, about that long, like an inch and a half. And that way, the gun just shoots it in and it doesn't move anything around, and then that'll hold it in place. I don't have one of those. Maybe I'd get one if I do enough of these, but for now I'm just gonna use a hammer. Oh yeah, that went through a little bit much. But then I like to put the neck on as well before we go to the other side. We cut this at an angle because the neck is angled slightly forward. So once we put this on the base and have this, then it'll have that slight tilt forward that the neck. And then I usually try to do this about in the middle of this, maybe a little bit more space on this side than here on the back. Yeah, a little bit more space for the chin than on the back of the head. And that is about where we want it. Mark it. So that's where we want this to be placed. This is parallel with this bottom line, or as parallel as I can get it. And let's go ahead and glue that in place. On this side, the nail I'm going to do closer towards the back, and then when I do the other side, I'll do it closer towards the front. This is kind of tricky to keep it from sliding as we're working. So there we have the nails on that side. Here you can see those nails coming through on the other side. Then I'm going to look from both sides to try to align this as best as I can. And then I can place this on the nails that went through and try to align them really well. So here, looking at the top, I want to get that aligned, and then same thing from the side. So now I can just kind of hammer it down on those nails that are already there. Another nail. And then this is where we're going to use that third triangle. We're going to put this down here at the bottom as just a spacer. So it's just a spacer between these so that once this closes, there'll be equal distance on either side. And it should be flush on the bottom as well. Try to align it as best we can with the other one. So there we have the nail on one side. Now I'm going to do another nail on this side. This should hold everything together really nice. The same thing with this triangle. We're going to glue it in place. I'm just going to set this right there, parallel with the bottom. And then one nail through this should be enough to hold everything together. There we have that head and neck. Now we're going to place this right there. If you want it extra secure, you can nail it in place. I'm going to try it with glue. The other ones I've nailed, but it is kind of tricky to get a nail to go down, and it moves around a little bit as you're doing it. A nail gun at an angle would probably be the easiest thing. And if you feel like this is uneven, you can go back to the saw and just cut it off clean at this angle. Gonna put some glue on that. Now, because this triangle is here, it keeps it from tilting forward, so the glue might be enough to hold it. If this triangle wasn't here, there wouldn't be anything to keep this just from tipping over. So that's another reason why having a little bit larger of a triangle here might be helpful. Gonna take some glue on these. Gonna glue that in place. I'm gonna see if that'll hold. If I just put the glue, if everything holds in place, we'll see. Now, in the past, I did nail these down. I would hold it in place and then try to nail it with the glue underneath. It was just kind of a pain to do it that way. If you don't want to use wood glue that kind of slips around, you could use some 5-minute epoxy. That might set up a little bit better, and it should attach it pretty well. Gorilla Glue is also a good option. This has had a little bit of time to set up, so I'm actually gonna add some of these cutoffs from the corners of the 2x4s into these corners just to give it some added strength. I'm just trying to get a lot of glue, dipping those triangles in. Maybe I went a little crazy with the glue on this side, but. So there you have my method for building these armatures. Some modifications that you could make, like I said, you could use a different type of glue, like a 5-minute epoxy or Gorilla Glue. You might find that those are easier than wood glue. Having a nail gun would have really been helpful. A modification that I thought would be really cool is rounding off this piece just a little bit and then drilling a hole through all 3 of these and then put a bolt in between these and then tighten that bolt. And that way you have kind of a joint so the head can actually tilt on the neck with that bolt serving as a hinge so that the head can look down or look up depending on what you want to do with your sculpture. I don't know, I just thought these were kind of cool. I came up with the idea when I was preparing for the sculpture that me and my wife were going to do. I was going to do a blind sculpture versus my wife, and that was a really fun video if you haven't seen that. And then in that one I also put a screw in the back of the head to remind myself of where that widest point was going to be so that while I was sculpting blind I could feel it and it would give me an indication of where things ought to be. And then this profile also came in really handy while I was working. I just thought that it turned out really cool, so I wanted to share that. If you're interested in portrait sculpting, I hope that you'll join my online portrait sculpting course. We dive really deep into anatomy, the muscles of the face, fat pads of the face, muscles of the neck, structure of the skull, all of that good stuff. So if you'd like to master the portrait and really understand one of the most difficult things to represent in art, then be sure to join that course, and we go over each of the facial features in detail. It's a really fun course. So I hope that if you like this kind of stuff, that you'll consider joining that and helping support the channel. Okay, until next time, stay creative, stay productive, and hopefully I'll see you again soon in another video.